you, Lena. So we'll have major questions at the end. Or I've just got 21 slides, and so hopefully we shouldn't take the full 3-hour slot that we have right here. I'm just kidding. But feel free to raise your hand and let me know if you've got any questions. Obviously, we're talking about composting and primarily residential composting, so things that you can do right on your own property. Maybe I'll just point out. So this is my backyard. I've got just a static compost bin. This is the Earth Machines bin, and this is a tumbler, a compost tumbler. So more of a dynamic compost bin. Obviously, you tumble it like this. Both of them, I like having both of them. Actually, I run them in series, so generally I put mine in the static bin first, the food waste and other yard waste in the static bin, and then I use the compost, the tumbler for kind of finishing it. So what is composting? Anybody have any ideas? One of the things I just looked at what, just kind of separate out the word. Com means together, and post means to bring. So basically bringing material together and starting that natural process of decomposing. And I thought some of the most famous composters are over from England. Why should I compost? One is it reduced the waste disposal costs. So residents pay their community, and then the community actually pays generally on a per ton basis. One of the largest components on weight of the solid waste stream is actually food waste and organic material. Two is it saves the landfill space, so those landfills then can last longer. And then three, keeping nutrients in the loop. So I don't want to say that landfills are bad, but one of the things about landfills is that material gets there and stays there. Some of them have leachate circulation within the landfill, and that can be good. It helps to degrade it and then actually make make more landfill space. Some of the landfills actually have methane recovery, but even the methane recovery systems only capture about 20 to 30% of the actual methane generated. And again, and then those nutrients really don't get back out into the environment where they can be useful again. They're trapped in that landfill. So another reason for why to compost, and I mentioned this already, but 75% of household solid waste is organic material and generally pretty easily compostable. So an average family of four generates just under 2 tons of organic waste each year. The other huge thing is food waste is the 3rd highest cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. So obviously there's coal plants, there's all the transportation emissions. Food waste is the next biggest component to greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got 170 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year that are generated from food waste. And if that food waste, as it degrades, if it goes to methane as opposed to carbon dioxide, methane's actually 29 times more powerful of a greenhouse gas. So the benefit of composting that and composting aerobically rather than, which basically off-gases carbon dioxide, versus anaerobically without air, off-gassing to methane, is really huge. Another reason for compost, and I mentioned this earlier, the nutrients. So a lot of really important nutrients that you can basically return to the soil if you're able to compost. Also neutralizes toxins. So we use this compost in rain gardens. So any bioretention facility, compost is really beneficial. It grabs onto those heavy metals and actually helps to basically neutralize those toxins as well as the heavy metals. And it also acts as a pH buffer, so helps to keep the pH as close to that middle ground, 7 versus on the 1 to 14 range, right? So just a cautionary note about food waste disposers. A lot of people have these and like them a lot, but there's a couple of things a couple of points that I want to bring up. Number one, they cost some money. A good food waste disposer costs about $150 new. A bad one costs even more. And then it obviously it costs money to install it. It uses electricity both at the home, but then also that food waste, because it's used as water. So generally, you can see Princess Leia up here using her food waste disposal. Basically you're putting quite a lot of water on in order to have that food waste flow through. And depending on what you put in there, like potato peels are notorious for clogging the home sanitary pipes and potentially the public sanitary sewer pipes as well. And then generally then you have that food waste that ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. Then they have to dispose of those biosolids. Now, those biosolids can be pretty good, and it actually does provide a good nutrient basis. Most good wastewater recovery facilities, like the one that City of Baraboo has, then take those biosolids and apply them on agricultural fields nearby, and that's beneficial. But again, think about all the money that is transpired along the way from the food waste disposal in your kitchen to the wastewater treatment plant, as well as hauling the biosolids around. So if you're able to use that right on your own property, there's a lot, we don't have as much transportation, we don't have as much electricity, we don't have as much water usage. So how composting works? Basically, you've got all this team of all kinds of different organisms, bacteria, fungi, actinomycetes, mycetes, I think. And if there's any English folks out there that can help me better pronounce that, let me know. And then macroorganisms, basically worms and insects. So we've got a soil food web. They're all working together, chomping on this food waste, and then turning it into usable nutrients. So one of the things about composting, especially if you really want to accelerate your compost from your food waste to usable nutrients, you'll actually want to look at the temperature and the moisture conditions. One of the things about temperature is there's 3 ranges of bacterial growth. So the really cold temperatures, and generally in winter, if you're composting outside, which most people do, then there's bacteria that do grow and break down the food waste. Now it's much slower than the mesophilic or thermophilic, but there is still some degradation that's occurring with the psychrophilic. And then mesophilic, basically, in English temperatures in Fahrenheit, 70 to 90 degrees is that mesophilic range, and that's really where the bulk of the degradation occurs. Thermophilic is you're getting up hotter. The benefit of compost going through this thermophilic phase is that it really helps to kill the pathogens. Pathogens need to be up in that thermophilic range for at least, like a period of 3 days plus at 150 degrees Fahrenheit really can kill most pathogens. And so that's really beneficial that it goes through almost all of those. And again, it can just be in the mesophilic and thermophilic range and really do well. Sometimes it's hard to get it below that, especially during the summer, below that 55 degree Fahrenheit range. And again, you can, like in most municipal composting facilities, they actually have a big compost thermometer, and like the one that I had at Fitchburg is like literally 2.5 feet long, because you want to see what the temperature is like in the pile rather than just on the surface of the pile. And you can do that at home. I don't. I'm a pretty big nerd, but I'm not that much of a nerd, right? So what stuff can I compost? And I've got a couple of different examples, but any thoughts about one of the slides I like about, or one of the things I like about this graphic is it talks about browns and greens. The brown stuff is generally high in carbon. How about greens? Any idea about what's high, what nutrient or what mineral, I guess, or element, I'm sorry, is in greens?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen, yeah. So basically, mixing browns and greens, and generally, for optimal compost, about 1/3 browns and 2/3 greens, makes the quickest compost. But you can do it with 100% browns. You can do it with 100% greens. It just you have to make sure that you're turning it more often, making sure you get enough moisture, because the browns need more moisture, and the greens already have quite a bit of moisture right in it. So, kind of mixing a lot of those different types of things. So here you might be able to read this a little bit easier, but yes, fruits, vegetables, leaves, coffee grinds, tea bags, flour, sawdust, hair, dirt. I guess I haven't composted hair before, but apparently that's all right. Newspaper, eggshells, tree trimmings, paper bags. So those are some of the yes items. In here, what they've got is, and again, some of these actually you can compost if you get it up hot enough, or really optimize your process. But usually meats, fats, bones are the things that and oils and greases. Generally, those are no-nos. Bread, seafood, oil, cheese, meat, bones, weeds, compostable utensils. Even though they're compostable usually in a municipal facility, they really don't compost very well in something that's not going thermophilic, for long periods of time. So I've tried it. I've tried compostable containers. Now, some of the paper-based compostable containers actually seem like they've broken down for me. The plastic-based or the bioplastics. Really, I can still read the labels, after months and months of mesophilic composting. Takeout containers, tissues, paper towels. Now, some of these, I generally, certain types of things. I don't know if anybody's heard of lasagna gardening. Lasagna gardening is basically you're putting things like newspaper, cardboard down first, and it's more for gardening. And then you're putting mulch, so usually leaf mulch on top of it. You can use compost or mix, compost with leaf mulch, but that's kind of, it takes a while to biodegrade. And some of the benefit of that in a lasagna garden is that it helps to keep the weeds from coming up through it, right? So and the newspaper kind of does the same thing. So you can compost, but it's generally, in a home composting system, putting cardboard isn't adding a whole lot of benefit, and you can, most cardboard, as long as it's clean, you can recycle that, right? And so that's a better use of cardboard. Now, if you've got a dirty pizza box and you don't want to throw that in the garbage, you can probably, but you want to probably shred it up a little bit. Go ahead.
What is the fine print under leftovers?
Under leftovers, unless they're vegan, leftovers, and again, more of it, part of it because, a lot of leftovers, if you eat meat and I eat meat, you don't want to have that meat in there. And so if you've got that blended, like spaghetti sauce, usually the way I cook it, has meat in it. And so those are generally things that you don't want to have in your compost, and more because of the potential for pathogens, right?
And it also attracts rodents.
Exactly. Yeah. So then it kind of depends. Depending on what type of bin you have, you might have more of a prevalence of issues for rodents. And so bin selection is important when you've got. But again, you need to think about all the different, what you're putting into it. But that's a great point, Jim. Yes. Some more yes and no items. I guess this is the same one that I just went through. But meat, pet poop. Now, this one I have tried, and it did not work. I would not recommend it. It was nasty. But I was was trying to figure out, well, because we had a really big dog at the time, and it was like, this is a lot of stuff that's going into my solid waste. I'm like, is there a way that I can do it? And it was nasty. I would not recommend that. I did that once. I'll do almost anything once, but I won't do it again.
What about livestock manure, like horse?
So now, again, if it's already partially degraded, that's great stuff to put on gardens. If it's basically been, you can get elephant poop at Circus World Museum here in Baraboo, and usually it's been moved around for it's like 5 years old, and it's really good stuff. Now, fresh manure, in a home composting situation, I wouldn't recommend that. Now, if you're doing it, like the city of Baraboo, actually, I was hoping to get some slides from Tony Gilman at the city of Baraboo. I didn't get a chance to. He wasn't able to work with me to get that story told. But there's a really cool story about what Tony's doing at Baraboo's municipal composting facility that I hope maybe we can do a story on next year and potentially have it in the News Republic. But If you're turning, large piles, there's actually, they call it mortality composting in farm systems. So, they literally take, animals that have died and then compost the animals right in. And, after, a few months, if it's being processed properly, there's no semblance of any remains of the animal if you're doing it optimally. Fats, greases, again, are generally no. Coal ashes, probably if you're spreading out, just coal is just not beneficial. So and I guess most residents would maybe have charcoal. But again, a little bit of that probably isn't going to hurt, but a lot of it's not going to. It will delay the composting process. And then diseased plants, again, generally, really even in municipal composting, it's generally not a good idea to have diseased or invasive plants because unless you really watch the temperature and you're getting that temperature up high enough that you're really killing the seeds from those plants, and then also killing the diseases, basically, or neutralizing that. So put some more exhibits of what you can compost. Again, grass clippings. Now, I generally recommend people to grass cycle, basically mulch your grass clippings right into your lawn. Some people just really do not like the look of or the feel as they're walking over the wet grass and then tracking grass clippings in. So some people do prefer to compost them. You can put those in a composting facility, in a composting bin like this, but again, it's probably, a pile is fine as well, or just, actually using it as top mulch in your garden helps to limit the amount of hoeing or, weeding that you need to do. If you've got a nice, usually what I layer, grass clippings, I actually go pick up grass clippings at the city drop-off site, and you use that as after I planted my seeds in my vegetable garden. So I put about a 2 to 3 inch layer of grass clippings, and then I put a 2 to 3 inch layer of leaf mulch on top of that, and then I don't have to hoe in between. I don't get weeds growing up in the tomatoes and green beans and other vegetables that I have. So start where the materials are. So this is compost, and this is really important. This is like anybody like to use reusable bags at the grocery store. So and I do too. But if I forget my reusable bag, I will sometimes just use whatever bags are in my vehicle. Sometimes I reuse plastic bags, but it's really important to keep those reusable bags if you're going to actually use them either in your vehicle or bike if you like to grocery shop with a bike or walking. So that's a really important thing. So where's most of the food generated and organic material generated that people can put into their bin or into their compost bin outside?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. So keeping a bin that works for you is really critical. I saw this particular bin. It's in the lower left-hand and lower center corner. Down over in Boston. In Boston, the folks on the coast can really, especially in Boston area, can tell us a lot about composting. And it's really, I don't think they can tell us a whole lot about pronouncing words, but this has really worked out well for me. I got this 12 years ago, and we use it basically not necessarily every day, but every week is being used. This one actually has a vented lid, so it's got holes in the top. And some people actually, at least when I first saw this, I was like, nah, I think I'll take a solid lid. I don't want that smell getting permeating. But what's interesting about the vented systems is that if it helps keep it a little bit more aerobic. If you seal this off and you put the waste in there, it's going to go anaerobic. And what happens when things go anaerobic? You get smell. Yeah, it smells. And again, so the most important, especially if you've got it in your home. Now, obviously, it'd be best if I emptied this out on a daily basis. Then it probably wouldn't be a problem. If I am waiting as much as I do, which is generally a week to multiple weeks, you get two issues for me anyway. Is the smell. Even with this, especially as the material builds up, the stuff in the bottom is basically sealed and starting to generate methane down there. So I would if you're gonna, I think it's, if you're gonna use your food waste in your compost bin, get a pail that you really like. And this one actually I like because it just sits right on the. I've got 2 pegs on the door below my sink, and the lid actually can stay up, and so I can peel potatoes and carrots right into it. It's a nice height. But again, there's a couple of different examples here. We have, the Green Homes and Businesses team and/or the Green Spaces team might be looking at, or we might be talking about making compost bins available for sale for people, as well as and possibly also considering getting some different types of kitchen compost pails. Again, that's really, in my opinion, this is probably the most critical thing to get right when you're starting, is you want to have it where you can actually use it, and you will use it. Otherwise, if you don't put, if you've got your trash bin and or recycling bin, handier than the compost bin, that's probably where things are going to go, right?
Could you talk about fruit flies?
Yeah, so that's the other thing about time. So the holes on these lids, because that's one of the things fruit flies can get through. They can't get through this size of hole. They actually can't get through. But if I keep food waste in there for more than a week, then I can get fruit flies. And as soon as I open this up, then to put more stuff in, fruit flies come out, right? and we actually have we have some fruit fly issues right now in our kitchen, more because of the pineapple that we let go a little bit too long, and so it takes a while to eradicate that. But you do need to be emptying your food waste probably on a weekly basis and maybe more. I don't know the exact life cycle of a fruit fly, but I'm guessing that it would take more than a week, or at least I've only had fruit fly problems when I've left food waste in there for more than a week. So
Probably beneficial, actually, if they're outside.
they're great outside. Yeah, it's the amount of action, the amount of fruit flies in my Earth Machine compost bin is just amazing, and that they are definitely part of that component of basically the organisms that are chomping on that food waste.
I have a question, Rick.
Yeah, go ahead.
We sometimes get mold in our kitchen compost bin.
I do too.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing it's part of the breaking down process. This one in particular, one of the things I like about this is, I can just clean it out by hand, but it also is dishwasher safe. So I've put it in the dishwasher 2 at times, but generally I've got a big scrub brush because usually I don't scrub it out very often. It's maybe once every year, whether I need it or not, and I always need it, right? And so, but yeah, and you can see obviously. It's still, even though I spent some time, this morning cleaning it out a little bit, there's still, residue, but just because I let it get a little bit longer than it probably should. It's obviously not great to have in your kitchen, but and that's really if I were taking this out on a more regular basis, it would be certainly better. So other things on how do I compost is what type of bin do you want to use? Now there's some really nice basically manufactured static bins like this. This is a huge one. This is the one. This is basically Earth Machines is the brand that a lot of people have seen. Dane County, and I think Sauk County may have been selling these for a while as well. There's a different bin that Sauk County's was selling up until recently that's a little bit more like this. I think just a bigger black bin. All of these work, and the nice thing about these is that usually does a halfway decent job of keeping animals out of it, but most of them are open on the bottom. Obviously you can basically make a screen. I've seen some people actually will set these types of bins on the bottom, but So I have gotten mice when at different spots where I put my static bin. I've gotten mice, especially during the winter. They love it in there because it's nice and warm, right? Again, the only way that they're able to really get in and out is by crawling underneath. And so if that's a concern, you can certainly put a screen there, and that'll help minimize that chance. And then generally, most of these compost tumblers, there's really not a way for animals like that to get in. And then the benefit of the tumbler is that it's introducing, it's not, if it's getting dry, you can see that visually. Obviously, you can put your hand in there if you really are brave, and don't have a close, ready spot to wash your hand off. Generally the best compost is about the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. So you don't want it, it can be too wet, and basically if it's too wet, it'll be more anaerobic. If it's too dry, you won't have enough moisture to get the degradation process continuing on. But having oxygen available to it is really critical to basically optimize the compost.
Rick, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I'm thinking that the smaller the pieces of whatever you're putting in, whether it's yard waste or food waste, the better? Is
Yes.
that true?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, if you really want to optimize your, the degradation of the compost, like a potato takes a while if you leave the skin on it and just compost your potato. And, you sometimes, like the pineapple that I just threw in there with all the fruit flies on it, that pineapple takes, if I don't cut it up, it'll take probably, go all summer to break down enough that you can't really see it anymore. So, what I do, especially when I do clean out my static bin and put it into my tumbler, I'll take a spade and I'll just take the spade. If it's too gross for me to cut up before I put it in the bin, I'll just take the spade and basically just slice it with the spade. So you need to have a sharp spade, obviously. But I found that works really well. And then if I do that before I put it in the tumbler, and then tumble it. Again, you don't have to do it. You don't have to keep tumbling, but just turn it once or twice, and that helps. You just makes the main thing is you want to get oxygen integrated throughout the compost. There's another question here, right?
Yeah. Is there like a benefit to having like an actual bin versus just out in the open, other than just animals getting?
I think the main thing that I've seen is, obviously, it keeps the material there as opposed to getting pulled around by animals. But yeah, I think definitely one of the big benefits that I've noticed is that I have less animal intrusion if I have basically a wall around it. But you can certainly compost in piles. Like this is, these are the 3-bin systems, and usually you'll start on put your raw food waste in one, and then after a while you might turn it a couple of times, and then really as you turn it, as you move it from one of these bins to the other. This particular one, they're putting the fresh food waste in here, and then turning it into each one. And by the time that it gets that last bin, a couple of turns, and it's ready to go wherever you're going to use it. If you've got leaves, like these bins don't work very well. If you've got some big trees, or a lot of trees that you're these don't work. These are more meant for food waste in smaller amounts. I think this is a 50-gallon size. This one probably is, I'm guessing this might be close to 100 gallons. That's a really big one. But like we've got this 80-foot tall maple that's just huge, and it drops lots of leaves. So we don't put the maple leaves in. But what we do is we actually use the maple leaves, and then just use them as mulch in our flower gardens. And also in the fall, obviously we're pretty much done with most of our gardening, and I put the leaves on the garden, and then I'll just reuse those leaves after I have to pull them off. Usually put them into wheelbarrow or other bin while I plant. But then after I plant, then I just use the leaf mulch as mulch in the garden, and it really works well for me anyway. The other is vermicomposting. And I did do this. I actually had one of these bins. When I was a Boy Scout leader, we were kind of learning about compost, and this worked really well. So these you can have you generally have inside, right? So in general, usually in a basement, if you've got a basement. Some people put them in like a pantry, but you can get fruit flies, and that was the reason that I no longer worm compost is the fruit flies really got bad, I was told get that out of the house, and so it went outside. All those worms, unfortunately, didn't survive the winter, or at least as far as I know, they may have. I put the material actually in my other compost bin, so it's possible that they work their way into the compost and down. But anyway, that's vermicompost. You can spend about $100 to $150 depending on which type you want. And the nice thing about these bins is that you basically usually you'll start at one end, and then by the time you get down to the bottom, you can they're stackable basically. But the worms really break down that food waste a lot quicker than without worms. The other nice thing that I really like that I really liked about the worm composting is there's quite a lot of water that comes off of there, or basically compost tea, and there's a little spigot that you can utilize, and so I actually use that to water the plants, and it really seemed like I don't talk plants, but it seemed like my plants were a lot happier when they had the compost tea. But that was just me. You can also make your own bed, basically drilling holes through this is a Rubbermaid container, and then generally you're shredding either paper or newspaper, usually newspaper, to integrate that into the worm compost mix. Again, the paper basically helps provide more of the carbon, and then most of the food waste is higher on the greens, or basically the nitrogen level. And this is obviously what the worms look like, and it's amazing how I think I bought a half pound of worms, and they'll grow if you transfer them properly. They'll grow. You'll be able to they multiply like crazy. Not quite as much as rabbits here in Baraboo, but pretty close. So this is a nice graphic that kind of shows the ins and outs, the whole process. Again, think about where you're going to put your compost bin, adding thinking about what you're putting into it, keeping it moist but not wet. Again, wrung out sponges about the consistency or the moisture content that you want to have, and occasionally turn. Again, generally the more you turn that compost, the quicker it's going to biodegrade. And then monitoring the temperature. Sometimes if temperature is getting too hot, actually that can slow the process down. But generally you can either add a little bit of moisture if it's too dry. Turning it will actually get more oxygen in there and really help it just degrade a lot better. And then identify where you're going to utilize that material. And again, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
What is it? Well, how do you define occasionally in terms of turning it?
So, I mean, like a static bin, I will sometimes. I don't know that I've turned mine at all this summer. So that's probably if I really wanted to get compost quicker, then I would turn that or put it. I've been lazy. I've been just busy doing other things, so I haven't transferred the material from my static bin into the compost tumbler and utilize that. So, I mean, we're still, we've actually been putting our yard waste from the garden into the bin, but it just sinks down, and now I've got some more room, and once it fills, obviously, then I probably it'll keep degrading. But again, if you really want to get optimal, you'll turn it once a week if you really want to optimize the compost. But again, it's not like I really I'm not making money from the compost, so I'm not as probably aggressive as I could be. So ways to tell whether the compost is ready to use. Again, the dark brown color really, is a telltale. If you're basically seeing, okay, I'm not seeing a pineapple in here. I'm not seeing. Orange peel is another one that really, orange peels don't degrade very, very well and does provide, some acidic. I've been able, I guess it's more of the vermicomposting I've had problems with the orange peels. Worms haven't liked the orange peels that I put in there. But basically seeing, if you can't recognize any of the materials that you put in anymore, that's usually a good thing. Another way, you can tell by smell a little bit. But another way is the bag test. So basically sealing it in a bag, it could be a Ziploc bag, and then just leaving it for several days. Now, if it's still degrading, you'll smell that. I mean, it'll smell, it'll have a real pungent smell to it, and basically, like a little bit like methane. But if it's degraded and it's done, basically gone through that process, you really won't have much of that foul odor at all. The other thing is to see if seeds are germinating. Now, if seeds are germinating after a compost, that just means that you didn't get temperatures up high enough to kill those seeds. Now, depending on what the seeds are, maybe you want to have the tomatoes growing, the volunteer tomatoes in there, but it really depends on what you're putting into it. And again, how do I use the compost? So obviously, I actually grabbed a whole bunch of the Baraboo municipal compost that's available for free to City of Baraboo residents. And when I put in the 4 different raised garden beds, so I filled the bottom 4 inches with wood mulch, basically stump mulch from ground stumps from ash trees that were ground up right in my neighborhood. I just took the wheelbarrow over and nobody complained about me taking the ground up wood, but that really worked well in the bottom, and then I finished that off on the top with about 4 inches of the compost that was available at the Baraboo's municipal facility. You can make rain gardens with it, so blend with sand, and you can really blend it with any soil. But the compost really is beneficial in rain gardens and other bioretention facilities. You can spread it, uniformly on your lawn. So obviously he'll go back and rake this in, but after the first rainfall, you really don't notice that it's there, other than usually the grass is growing better after you put the compost in. And then obviously the compost tea, you can, if you have, now again, I don't have, because the bottom, you can get leachate from, large municipal piles, and so that's why there is a permitting process that DNR follows to make sure that you're basically turning it enough that what leachate isn't running off. But generally, I haven't had any leachate from my smaller systems, but a big component of that is incorporating it in and turning it. Go ahead, Lena.
Can you make compost tea using the compost? Like other than having it, sink to the bottom and pouring it off?
Yeah, so
Mix it up yourself?
yeah, so certainly that's something that I've not done other than the worm composting bin. Again, you really need to have something that kind of decants. Go ahead, Jim.
Done it, and it helps to have a air pump with a little aerator stone like you'd see in a fish tank, and so that's just to keep it aerated. So
Sure.
just put some compost into a bucket or whatever, and then aerate it. And that's one thing they say is make sure to aerate it.
And I would think, Lena, too, another way to get compost tea is I would think you'd probably want to do it on more finished compost. So once it's closer to finished, just putting like a paper towel or something like that, and then putting it in some sort of a bin, and then having a way to let it basically filter that out, and then you can probably add water, I would imagine, And then basically those nutrients will effectively leach out of the compost and then into whatever vessel you've got it put into.
So with the static bins, and if you're turning it regularly, are you taking out maybe a third at a time that's ready to put on your garden or your lawn? Or are you waiting for the whole bin to decompose and take the whole contents out?
Yeah, so generally, usually, obviously you're filling from the top. Most of the time you're filling from the top. There is a port. You can pull that. You can't really see it very easily, but on the one side there's actually a trap door that you can pull up, and then. But I've not found that very easy to shovel out of there, because it's partly because it's just so compacted or densified after it's in there. What I found is when I want to move it, I can get some of it, just for the shovel, and I can pull some of that material out, and then I just load it in without moving the bin. But these bins, because it's open on the bottom and they're shaped like this, you can pull the whole thing up, leave the pile there, and then just shovel the pile either into a wheelbarrow and then take it along. Generally, the stuff that's on the bottom that's been there the longest is going to be the closest to being ready. But what I found for my static bin is that, because I'm not good about turning it. Now there are some, the different there's some different tools that you can use to jam down there and then turn it like this, and that works. That probably that would work fairly well. Again, I've just been too lazy to use. I've got one of those types of just hand machines, but generally I just because I figure it's going to do its thing, and then but what I found is that putting it in the compost tumbler really will finish it off a lot quicker. And if I just have it in the compost tumbler for a couple weeks, and I just remember to turn it every so often, maybe over a couple of days, the material is pretty unrecognizable. I mean, it's pretty much finished compost after a couple to a few weeks, depending on what it was like when I put it in there.